The old wooden bench overlooked a quiet park where children laughed beneath a bright blue sky, birds drifted lazily between tall oak branches, and warm daylight painted everything with a peaceful glow. Yet for one man sitting alone on that bench, the beautiful morning felt strangely empty. At 68 years old, Alaric Whitmore had spent decades believing that success, respect, and endless hard work would protect him from loneliness. Instead, retirement had stripped away the title on his office door, his children had become busy with lives of their own, old friends had slowly disappeared, and every sunrise reminded him of something he feared more than growing old, the possibility that he no longer mattered. Many people believe aging is the greatest challenge life can offer. They prepare for wrinkles, slower steps, and aching joints. Few prepare for the silence that arrives when the world stops expecting anything from them. That silence can feel unbearable, or it can become the greatest teacher a person will ever meet. Alaric had always been the man who solved everyone else's problems. During his 40-year career as an engineer, people sought his advice before making difficult decisions. His phone never stopped ringing. His calendar was always full. Every hour carried purpose. When retirement finally came, friends congratulated him on reaching freedom. They imagined vacations, hobbies, and peaceful afternoons. Instead, his mornings became painfully long. The phone rarely rang anymore. The invitations slowly disappeared. The same people who once needed him had learned to live without him, leaving him to question whether his value had ever existed outside his profession. Each morning he followed the same routine. He walked through the nearby park beneath brilliant daylight, greeted strangers who often smiled politely without recognizing him, and sat on the same weathered bench while watching life continue without asking for his participation. Young couples hurried toward work. Parents chased laughing children across the grass. Elderly friends gathered in cheerful groups while he remained quietly alone. It wasn't anger he felt. It was something heavier, the invisible weight of becoming forgettable. One sunny Tuesday, his routine unexpectedly changed. While cleaning an old bookshelf at home, he discovered a worn copy of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. The book had belonged to his grandfather, whose handwritten notes filled nearly every margin. Alaric remembered receiving it decades earlier, but had never taken time to understand its wisdom. That afternoon, under clear daylight pouring through his living room windows, he opened the first page. The words seemed impossibly simple. They did not promise happiness through wealth, admiration, or comfort. Instead, they reminded him that peace begins when a person stops demanding control over things beyond their reach. The realization unsettled him. He had spent his entire life controlling projects, schedules, employees, and outcomes. Retirement felt painful precisely because it had taken away that illusion of control. The following days became different. Instead of measuring his worth by who called him, Alaric began measuring it by how he carried himself through ordinary moments. He no longer waited for invitations. He created purpose where none appeared to exist. Every morning he walked farther through the neighborhood, smiling at familiar faces without expecting conversations. He visited the local library during bright afternoons, where he quietly organized forgotten history books that volunteers struggled to shelve. Nobody asked him to help. Nobody applauded his effort. Yet for the first time in years, he returned home with a strange sense of peace that recognition had never given him. Weeks passed. His posture changed before anyone noticed his actions. The sadness that had once bent his shoulders slowly disappeared. He no longer searched his phone every few minutes. Instead, he spent daylight tending abandoned flower beds outside the community center, planting colorful blossoms where weeds had grown for years. Passers-by often admired the flowers without knowing who had cared for them. Surprisingly, that anonymity became deeply satisfying. Stoicism had quietly taught him that meaningful work does not require applause. As spring gradually turned toward summer, people naturally became curious about the older gentleman who always seemed calm, regardless of weather or circumstance. Teenagers began greeting him during morning walks. Parents thanked him for making the garden beautiful. The librarian eventually invited him to help organize weekly reading circles for children. Without chasing importance, importance slowly returned to his life. One afternoon, while sunlight danced across the park pond, Alaric noticed another older man sitting alone exactly as he once had. The stranger stared silently toward the ground, carrying the unmistakable expression of someone who believed life had already finished with him. Alaric recognized that pain instantly because it had once lived inside him every single day. He quietly sat nearby. No speeches followed. No dramatic advice filled the afternoon. They simply watched ducks glide peacefully across the water while gentle breezes moved through the trees. Sometimes healing begins not through words, but through the quiet presence of someone who understands suffering without needing it explained. Over the following months, more retired men gradually joined their morning walks. None of them gathered to complain about aging. Instead, they shared stories of resilience, mistakes, forgiveness, and second chances. Some had lost spouses. Others struggled with distant families or declining health. Yet each discovered that while they could not rewrite yesterday, they still possess complete authority over how they responded to today. Alaric often reflected on one lesson above all others. Stoicism never promised an easy life. It promised something far greater. It offered freedom from becoming a prisoner of circumstances. It reminded him that dignity survives even when careers end, families become busy, or recognition fades. Character remains when everything else disappears. By the end of the year, the once-forgotten flower garden had become the most colorful place in the neighborhood. Children laughed there every afternoon beneath bright skies. Elderly couples rested on nearby benches. Young parents captured family photographs among blooming flowers. Few knew the quiet men responsible for transforming the space. Alaric never corrected them. Recognition had stopped mattering because purpose had taken its place. The greatest victory of his life had not come during his decades of professional success. It arrived much later, on ordinary mornings filled with sunshine, birdsong, and peaceful silence. He discovered that strength is not measured by how loudly the world celebrates you, but by how peacefully you continue walking when nobody notices. If this story encouraged you to reflect on your own life or reminded you of someone who embodies quiet strength, you're welcome to share your thoughts with others who may appreciate its message. As the sun slowly lowered across the peaceful park, Alaric smiled, not because life had become perfect, but because he finally understood what his grandfather had tried to pass on so many years before. Growing older is not about losing your place in the world. It is about discovering that your greatest value was never found in titles, applause, or attention. It was always hidden inside the calm mind, steady character, and quiet resilience that no circumstance could ever take away. That is the true power of Stoicism, and it belongs to anyone willing to embrace it.